Then you go back to Aquinas during the 13th century. Then you go back to Augustine in the 5th century. And you actually trace it back to theologians in the 2nd century. So this seems like a new concept with the Westminster Confession. It really goes way back to early church. The law, the threefold use of the law, the subject for tonight. You have in front of you chapter 19 of the Westminster Confession. As you all know, the Reformation really began. Historically, the Reformation began in 1517 when Luther nailed his theses to the church door in Wittenberg. And lo and behold, what is happening this weekend? It's the day that he did that, which is also what day? Which is an amalgamation of what? All Saints Eve. So it's really got distorted. It's gone from saints to devils over the centuries. Are you aware that Halloween is the second largest commercial enterprise of holidays?
If you look at net,
I think that says something about our culture.
people go nuts.
Okay, let's look at chapter 19 of the Law of God. Now, again, this is a fairly narrow focus. I have a book at home in which it discusses that there are 12 different ways that law is used in the Bible. We'll get you another piece of bacon or something and settle in for a long discussion. No, I'm only going to mention 3 or 4 of the different kinds of law. When Jews or Christians speak of the law and the prophets, the law there is the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. And generally when people say the law, and this is how it's used in the Westminster Confession, as Mosaic law. And the Mosaic law is summarized in 10 Commandments. And although the chapter 19 is on the law of God, the larger catechism and the shorter catechism cover the 10 Commandments in great detail. It's interesting to me, you believe in coincidences. I talked about this in Sunday school with the young adult class this past Sunday. We talked about it at noon today, and we're talking about it again tonight. So it must be important for us, huh? Okay. So there's you have the law and the prophets, the Torah. You have the Mosaic law, and tradition among Jews is there are 613 laws in the Old Testament. But how many in the New Testament? Huh?
2.
I would say the Jews don't have any.
I saw 2 references this week, 1,050.
1,050.
So that's one of the things that I want to do tonight is broaden your concept of the law
You said 1,050 in the New
in
Testament?
the New Testament. You can go down the list. Ephesians 4, don't let the sun go down in your anger. Let the thief steal no longer, let him do honest work. Jesus' instruction in prayer in several places. Go into your closet and pray the Lord's Prayer. Not to be anxious. There's instructions about speaking in tongues, the gifts in the church. Consider it all joy when you encounter various trials. Instructions for husband and wife. Husband, love your wife, Christ loves the church. When the wives obey the husband.
Yeah.
That's just a few of the laws in the New Testament. Going back to our subject tonight, the threefold use of the law. In your handout, God gave to Adam a law as a covenant of work. What were the laws given to Adam?
Dairy from that tree.
What?
Don't eat from that tree.
Okay. Were there other laws given?
Be pretty close on the line.
There have to be.
Have dominion.
What else?
Yeah.
Well,
Dominion over the animal.
you know,
Cain,
we also
yeah,
know
everything.
when Cain killed Abel,
He said in the
That
past.
was after that.
yeah, but what I'm saying
But,
is,
yeah, just make
he was
sacrifice.
Adam's son, so obviously Adam was given more laws.
Okay.
Name the animal.
They communicated daily in the garden, so they probably knew a lot of things.
Yeah, there are a lot
The
of.
Westminster Confession says that the law was given to Adam.
Right. And people think there was no law before the Mosaic law, but most scholars believe that there was teaching on all 10 commandments prior to the actual giving of the law from Mount Sinai.
If you read the Hammurabi Code, which predates that, there's much of the second table of law in that. Not quite the same way, but it came from, it's like. And then Adam, Cain was well aware that he had sinned when he killed Abel.
Right. Okay. So there was the first giving of the law to Adam, and then in section 2 it says that after the fall, there continued to be a perfect rule of righteousness and was delivered to by God upon Mount Sinai, and 10 commandments. And those 10 commandments are divided into 3 divisions called ceremonial, which has to do with worship, animal sacrifice, and so forth. Civil or judicial, those laws like the building a fence on top of your roof so that the people wouldn't fall off, and actually if in Genesis 21, there's instruction that if a thief breaks into your house at night, there's certain things you do. If he breaks in the daytime, it's a different punishment. They get that detailed. So that's some of the. Those are some of the judicial laws, and then there's the moral law, which is the 10 commandments. The 4 laws that concern our relationship with God, and 6 laws that refer to our relationship with each other and with other people. So it's a ceremonial law, the moral law, and the judicial law. There's little question that the ceremonial law, with the coming of the Christian age, it was nullified. And then the tricky part of this is in section 4. It says, to them, that is Israelites, as a body politic, he gave sundry judicial laws or civil laws, which expired together with the state of that people, not obliging any other now further than the general equity thereof. The general equity thereof is the stumbling point, because there's a lot of argument about which laws applies and which don't. For example, there are a lot of laws in the Old Testament about controlling skin diseases, moles, and so forth. Is that a moral part of the moral law, judicial law? Which is it? There's a lot of debate among Presbyterians and Reformed people about that. So that's the threefold division of the law. And from that we speak of the threefold use of the law. Because so much of that law, as I mentioned, the moral law, the Mosaic law, has been in the Old Testament, something doesn't apply to today, but there's 3 ways in which it clearly applies, and this is within the tradition of the Presbyterian and Reformed. The first is called pedagogical. That's a big word, which means simply it's teaching. It's a confrontation. It's a realization that you fail to keep it. We've been going through the larger catechism on the 10 Commandments, and it goes in great detail. kind of like when Jesus said that y'all shall not murder, but if you get angry, then you're moving toward killing. By that's elaborated further on the different parts of the law. So the law convicts us. We can't keep it. We make every effort to. In fact, it's interesting that if you tied a tape recorder around a person's neck, that they would convict themselves. Nobody lives up to that. And because we see that we can't live up to that law, then that leads us to somehow dealing with it, dealing with the guilt that comes from that, and of course that leads us to Christ. So that's why I say pedagogical just means the teaching aspect leads us to Christ. The second is the civil application. That is, not only is the law written in Scripture, it's also written on people's hearts. It says in Romans that every human being knows God. He knows the deity and His power. And apart from that, he also has at least a vague understanding of all the Ten Commandments. Because if you go around the world, the Ten Commandments are found in almost every culture. Not as specifically as they are in Scripture, but in a general and specific way. And then the third use is instruction. Now, we've been born again as Christians, been given the Holy Spirit. Why do we need the law now? A lot of people say, we're under grace, we're not under law, and I'll deal with that a little more later. Why do we need it?
How would you know how to please God?
And
Treat other people.
how to relate to other people,
Yeah.
how to relate to God and to other people.
Sanctification.
Yeah, the sanctifying process is, in fact, one way to illustrate that, those of you that have your e-Bibles and those of you that have your actual Bibles, if you turn to Psalm 119, we'll take a look at that. What is Psalm 119 about?
The law's life.
There's a story that in Scotland that this minister had his congregation singing the Psalm 119, and because it had 170 verses, it takes a while. So he started them singing the Psalm 119, and so he went out around the village and rounded up people to bring into the church while they were singing it. He had that much time for singing the 119th Psalm. Now, what are some of the synonyms of the law that are used here in Psalm 119?
Precepts.
Statutes.
Word.
Commands.
Decrees.
Way. What else?
Decrees.
Decrees. Now, why would I do this? Some people are just turned off by the word law. It sounds kind of harsh. We're under grace, not under law. But here, in Psalm 119, go down to Psalm 90 to verse 97. What's verse 97?
Oh, how I love your law.
Oh, what?
I love your law.
Oh, how I love you. Oh.
Commands are always with me, and make me wise
love have to do with law? In fact, in our Sunday school class, we're studying a chapter that is the title of which is Doctrine Divides and Love Unites. Is there a law in love?
Jesus says, I love you, keep my commandments.
We have a lot of, like a better word, liberals today. In fact, in the 60s, there was an expression, make love, not war.
Yeah, I remember that.
And so there are people today that said we need to love more and not have law, not have distinctives, just love each other. Is that possible?
No.
Do the liberals love everybody?
They certainly don't love us.
Exactly. All love has law within it. It may be subtle. It may not be well recognized. But all love has law in it. I use the illustration. The greatest love between a man and a woman is for them to get married. When they get married, what do?
Vow.
What's another word for vow?
Covenant.
Promise.
Law. So right there, the greatest union between a man and a woman, they define it by law. I'll do this and you do this and so forth, very specifically. So if you don't get anything else out of what I'm saying tonight, whenever you think love, think law. Whenever you think law, think love. And one step further, think liberty or freedom. There's a lot of talk also today, not only about love, but about being free from the law. Even in non-Christian and in Christian circles, to be free. But God has structured this universe in a way that the way to be free is to follow His laws. And so liberty is found through following laws. Not only that, Jesus said, I have come that you might have life and what? How does He do that? How does He bring about abundant life? What are we talking about? We're talking about law, but He does it in other ways. We have the Holy Spirit, and we're regenerated, and we can be taught by Him. But one of the ways that the abundant life comes about is through His law. Through instructions. If you don't like the word law, just use the word instructions.
Well, I think that holds true. You mentioned marriage. A marriage that doesn't turn into a brother-sister or roommate relationship, which a lot of them sadly do. A long-term marriage turns into freedom. Yet, if for someone looking at it from the outside, they see it as, well, you've got a lot of restrictions. You can't do this, you can't do that. I don't need to. And I don't want to. You don't understand how the guidelines give you freedom. The guy that doesn't understand. It's like, spare the rod, spoil the child. Y'all have a lot more, we were discussing this, y'all had a lot more children than we did. But you have to set boundaries, and within those boundaries, once you know the boundaries, once you know where the edge of the cliff is, it's easier to feel free because you feel safe. I think part of the law is this is the way to stay in God's good grace so that you are safe. You're safe from a whole lot of very disastrous things. Even if you just go through the 10 Commandments, think about if you did all of them with zeal. How, at first it sounded like, I'm just going to rebel. I'm going to do what I want to do. How does that turn out? You ever talk to anybody that actually did that? I used to teach some of those people. And it never ends well. And I guess that's what I think about a lot, is it creates boundaries, it creates like an open field for you to play in. You know, stadium isn't wide open, you've got.
That's interesting you mentioned that because I think it was during the 70s that some of these people that like to mess with education thought that having a fence around the playground of the school was just too restrictive. That was just not the thing to do. And so they took down the fences at some schools, and what happened? Anybody know that? What?
They stayed close.
No, they didn't.
They stayed close.
They congregated in the middle of the, and virtually there was no play. Without it even being conscious. They weren't conscious of this. It was just the fact they didn't have the security provided by, to use the word we're talking about, law. The law of the fence around the property.
Which is equivalent in that respect to when you're in education, it says that children have to have boundaries, they have to have in order to feel that security, that by knowing the parents' limits.
There have actually been studies done in with teenagers, given their a situation where they would open up, that they actually wanted restrictions. They would never say that to their parents, but they really want the restrictions. But the whole universe is set up on the basis of law. We speak of natural law, how the planets. One of the arguments for a creator is the fact that the sustainability of life in the universe is so precise. If the planets were to vary a little bit, or our distance from the sun, and especially within your body. I was reading this week, they've now decided there's something like 30 trillion cells in the human body. How in the world did that come out of the ooze? It's just not possible.
One of the things that you spoke about a lot in your career was a concept known as homeostasis. Homeostasis is your body finding an equilibrium. You get it out of that equilibrium, it doesn't matter what you did to get out, whether it's you ate too much or you didn't eat enough, you'll know real fast. We've been watching a series that came off the History Channel called Alone, and these guys get stuck out in the wilderness for a very long time, and they wind up starving, literally. And the homeostasis breaks down. Their body starts fighting with itself. It starts destroying itself. They have gone away from that natural law.
How do we deal with the verse, Romans 6:14? We're under grace, not under law. In our discussion, how do we work that out?
Grace is salvation. If I'm under the law, I have no chance of salvation. If I want to live a happy life, I need to be greatly concerned with the law to love how I deal with my fellow man and how I deal with God. But I cannot keep the law perfectly, and God requires perfect keeping of it. So luckily He sent Christ who kept it perfectly. But I'm not supposed to sin freely now that grace can abound more. That's not what it's about. I won't be happy doing that.
I want to suggest to you, more than suggest, I want to have you consider that the laws of the Old Testament, as far as the moral use is concerned, and all the laws of the New Testament are part of grace. That is, Andy was talking about. The law gives us the fullest expression of life if we live by those instructions to that extent. In fact, I was very interested in prevention as an aspect of medicine, and there have been hundreds, if not thousands of studies done, not so much recently, but in times past, to show the health benefits of being Christian. They use the term religion, but in the United States, they're really talking about Christianity. But the health benefits, there's less heart disease, there's less cancer. You can list every area of disease that people experience. And if you study those who are married versus those who are not married, it's dramatic. It's anywhere from twofold to tenfold, and sometimes even higher as far as the health. So there's an aspect of physical health that's given by being Christian, by being aware of the ways that we should obey God. And so, whenever you think law, think love, I call this the 5 L's of the Logos. You know who the Logos is? Christ. In the beginning was the Word, in the beginning was the Logos. So it's the 5 L's of Christ, but to alliterate the 5 L's of the Logos. Law, love, life, liberty, and light. Light being instruction. All those go together. You can't separate them. So, if you take home anything tonight, take home the fact, think love, think law, and think freedom or liberty. That's how liberty is found, through instruction. So that's branching out a little bit from the threefold use of the law to discuss law in other words. Any further comments?
I've got a question to go along with kind of what you just said about the health. Do you think there's merits to the fact that a lot of the ceremonial laws in the Old Testament were about health?
They would have to be. You would have two choices. They're either beneficial or they're not. If God gave them, they can't be the not. And so that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, they weren't just arbitrary. They were
Right. And there's a lot of debate, not a lot of debate, but some debate about whether we should follow those today or not. But I don't want to get into that.
Yeah.
Well, Jesus said he came to fulfill the law,
Yes,
not to do away with it.
not to do away with it. In fact, that's how we're saved. We couldn't have been saved except he kept the law perfectly. I just can't grasp that. You know, we sin in our minds in a way before we realize it. How was Christ able to do that? It's just being God-man, I suppose.
Do you think that, Proverbs is expounding the law too?
Yes, but it's, you have to be a little careful because you get both sides in Proverbs.
Right.
What
What to do and what not to do.
This is not one of the Proverbs, but it illustrates how the Proverbs go. There's this expression, look before you leap. There's also the expression, he who hesitates is lost. So how do those two go together? They both have a lot of real application, but in a way they're contradictory. But in a way they're also illustrative. And so many of the Proverbs are like that also. Okay.